Chair Tanaka,
Here.
Councilmember Lowing,
Here.
Councilmember Vinker.
Here.
For the record, all present.
Clerk, is there any members of the public who want to speak something that's not on the agenda?
No hands are raised and no requests to speak in person.
Okay, we're going to close public comment. The first item is Race and Equity Quarterly Report or Quarterly Update. Does staff have any comments on this?
I do. Thank you. Good evening. Chantel Cotton Gaines, Deputy City Manager. This item is an informational update. So I'm going to provide a little bit more background if that's okay with the committee. I know that we have 2 new committee members and I'm sure you've read through all the materials, but just to give you a little more background would be very useful. And again, as an informational update, because we continue to do the work. And so we are just in process. So the rewinding all the way back to 2020, our city council adopted a framework as well as putting together about 4 ad hoc committees on this topic of race and equity. There were a few related to policing specifically, and then there was one around citywide diversity and inclusion. And through those ad hoc committees of the city council, the council came up with some recommendations and took action in November of 2020 with 17 assignments for staff and similar to the city council as well. So I'm going to just run through those 17 items. The top line of this is of the 17, 15 have been completed. So we are continuing to progress on the last 2 items and we're making really good progress on those. So this is attachment A, if you wanted to follow along. And just for information as well, I typically run through the actual report during this item, just because it's a little easier to follow than if you had a PowerPoint and tried to compare between the 2. So the report itself, we have updates here on different things happening related to these topics, events, et cetera, in the community. But right now,
Actually, are you able to share your screen as you go through this?
I'll actually,
just so that members of the public can also watch it.
yes, I'm going to work with the clerk's office for that. But right now I'm going to focus on the 17 assignments from the city council, because that's really the core of the work direction of us as staff following up on those. So this is packet page 13, which is attachment A. So the assignments that we've completed so far, just so that the committee is up to speed, is the adoption of a mission statement. The city council did that in November of 2020. Our race and equity mission statement states that the city of Palo Alto is committed to creating a respectful, fair, and professional workplace and city. We will identify prejudices, eliminate inequities, welcome many perspectives, and use a collaborative approach to create an environment that works for everyone. The city's commitment to achieve equity in Palo Alto is a shared responsibility of our residents, organizations, governments, and other institutions. So the city council took that action at the end of 2020. Assignment B is to expedite the implementation of the new police records system, and with quarterly updates to council, which is what we've done through this committee, and to return with necessary agreements for the records management system, allowing for the Racial and Identity Profiling Act implementation. So this one we've actually split in terms of, it's page 13. Thank you. This one we have split out in terms of what's completed and what's not, because we have completed the implementation of the records management system. And we'll talk more about RIPA, or the Race and Identity Profiling Act, as we go along. We'll come back to item C, which has to do with RIPA as well. Item D is working with Santa Clara County on the implementation of participation in the Santa Clara County Psychiatric Emergency Response Team, which is the PERT program, and the Mobile Crisis Response Teams, and return to the City Council with any necessary agreements for the program. We were actually able to get our PERT team up and running, as some of you have experienced. We have lost our clinician for the program. And so the county is looking to do some recruiting and hiring for a clinician. And we also have funding proposed in our budget for this year to continue this program. And I have Chief Bender online who can speak a little bit more to that as well. But it is a very important program that's intended as an alternative response model in terms of being able to address mental health issues with someone that is a plainclothes officer and with a clinician that can help with emergencies as they come when people call 911.
Just to mention to my colleagues, if you guys have any questions as she goes through, I think it's better for you guys just to answer it, ask it, so that we kind of, it's all within a thread.
Sure. Question?
Yeah,
Go for it.
it seems like when we lose a staff member, that too is an emergency in this system if there's no backup. So, I mean, how quickly do we move on that? Or does the county have to do it all?
Very great question. So this program is in partnership with Santa Clara County. The clinician is an employee of the county. So the benefit of having it as a county employee is it gives us access to some of their mental health systems and other programs that we as a city would not have access to if we hire the clinician directly. In terms of the timing necessary, we have higher urgency to get the person on board, and we're sharing that with the county. The funding question has come up from Santa Clara County this program was funded by a special grant from the state, and that funding expires at the end of June. And so the county wanted to know from Palo Alto if we would have ongoing funding to continue funding a clinician beyond June. And I'll actually look to the chief to see if he wanted to add anything else to that. There we are.
Hey, good evening. I'll just add that since we knew that our clinician was leaving, work has been underway to replace her. So we've been moving forward with that for a couple months now. I met with the finance committee last Friday, and we spoke about SUMC money for funding our 2 PERT officers. So everything that the city can do in its power to get this going is underway, and I'm confident that in the coming months that will be underway in recruiting and hiring those clinicians in partnership with behavioral health services.
Do we participate in the interview of these people?
We do, and we did leading up to our clinician that we had with us for a time period, and we will continue to do so.
Is there any feedback from the person that left that, reflected on us rather than that person?
Yeah, it's a fair question. We called it an exit interview. She had nothing but good things to say about her experience with PAPD. It was definitely not an issue with the PD for why she left. She gave us some good feedback moving forward, and we've incorporated that into our process for the 2 clinicians we hope to hire with behavioral health services.
Okay, thanks very much.
Chief Binder, I just have a follow-up question on that. You mentioned talking to finance and making sure the funding was there. Why wasn't there already funding if the position had been, I'm confused. And if it's a county employee, why does that step have to be taken? If we're special?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, Councilman Member Vinker. We were part of a pilot program years ago. Then Chief Dennis Burns had volunteered the Palo Alto PD to be part of this pilot program with behavioral health services on a grant when the money came in. And we were fortunate when we got that PERT clinician that was part of that grant. So the funding, it cost us nothing other than the commitment of the officer who we designated as our PERT partner. But the clinician was entirely covered by the county. That grant funding is coming to an end here next month. And that's where there's some question about whether the county is going to be re-upping it. Sounds like just recently, as of last week, I learned that they may be incorporating some money into their budget for PERT. We haven't explored that further. What I had told the finance committee was whether it comes from funds that we have or the county, we believe so strongly in this program that we wanted to keep the ball moving forward so we can get that clinician back in here one way or the other.
So I take it that had we not lost our prior person, we would still have to go through this process to get the funding locally to pass that initial grant.
Yeah, we always knew from the get-go that the funding was going to be up in June. There was some hope that the county would extend that funding or find funding. And it looks like they may have, but that was unknown for a couple months. And like I said, we identified the funds through the Stanford SUMC funds. That's a net neutral on our budget, so it's not technically costing us money. We're able to use that money, and we're transitioning it into hiring those clinicians. So we thought that was a good option if the county wasn't going to have the money at the end of June, and it would allow us to get back into the PERT business as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. Because I agree with Councilmember Lowing that this is something that, and with you, that this is something that, is of great benefit to the city and should be a high priority. And I hope we can get back in business as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll just add that, the pilot program had one PERT officer. With the funding that we've identified, it's our goal to hire 2. And then that gives us coverage in a perfect world 7 days a week instead of just 4 like we had previous. And so having that PERT clinician and that PERT team out 7 days a week is our aspirational goal for what we're trying to do here.
Great. Well, I hope we achieve it. Thank you.
And on that note, I will point out the 3 programs that are sort of alternative response programs are PERT, which we just spoke about at length, the Mobile Crisis Response Team, as well as the Trust program. So I did want to take a moment and just orient the committee because sometimes it gets confusing between the 3. So the PERT program is the officer and clinician, and someone can call 911 and they would be able to reach our PERT team essentially through our dispatch center. The other 2 programs, MCRT as well as Trust, someone can go through 988. And those are fully county-run programs. The Trust program is new as of the end of last year. It went live. That program is modeled after the CAHOOTS program in Eugene, Oregon. And I'm so sorry for all the acronyms. There are just so many when it comes to this topic. And that program is intended to be without a law enforcement officer involved. And the MCRT program is in between, where there could have a law enforcement liaison. So the Trust program is the one that is the lowest acuity calls. So someone that is having some sort of mental health issue, but not presenting any sort of risk or danger to themselves or others around them, typically would be the type of call for Trust. And then it escalates from there up through the PERT program. So we requested from Congresswoman Eshoo in 2021, a federal earmark to build our own program like Trust. And at the same time, we asked the county to include a North County site for Trust, and we actually got both. So we were very grateful for that. And because we didn't want to create a duplicative program for Trust, we actually are using our $2 million from Congresswoman Eshoo to help with outreach and awareness so that people can use the Trust program. The Trust team is Momentum for Health, and they made a presentation to council, I believe, last month, and they're based right here in Palo Alto. So we really want to make sure that our community can use this team because they are nearby and serving North County. So just wanted to provide those additional acronyms for you as you're thinking about all of the alternative response programs. Any questions? Okay. So the next one on the list of assignments, I'm still reading from attachment A. Now we're at E, the letter E. Develop, update a policy on the timing of records release related to investigations that qualify for public disclosure under SB 1421 and AB 748. That was completed. In 2022, we finalized the procedures and workflow related to the release of records associated with investigations that qualify for public disclosure under those 2 bills. Going to the next one, amending and expanding the current independent police auditor scope of services to include all administrative uses of force reports where a baton, chemical agent, taser, less lethal projectile, canine, or firearm is used, in all cases where a subject's injuries necessitate any treatment beyond minor medical treatment in the field. This has been updated, and the council also, I guess if you look at G as well, the council also requested that the IPA make 2 reports to council each year with whatever cases are ready at that time. Previously, there have been some delays in the reports because the we would be trying to cover an entire time frame. And so the request from the city council was to get these reports more frequently so that the council can review what's going on. The cadence of those reports is anticipated to be around every February, March, and then in the fall around September. This year's report is late. We are planning to have the IPA come to the city council on June 12th for discussion of their most recent report, but they had prioritized one of the special reports the city council asked them to do on recruitment and hiring, and that was actually an informational report in one of your recent council packets. So the action item here was to update the contract with those items, and that piece has been done.
Is that the only one that's been done since June of 21?
The contract itself was the action from June of 21.
Okay.
The last IPA report, Chief Bender, if you're able to recall that off the top of your head.
Yeah, we've been on a semi-regular cadence set by the council, and just acknowledging what Ms. Cotton Gaines shared. We are late this spring. We're hoping to get that out in the coming weeks, and just finishing the final touches on that. It'll be OIR's report covering the second half of 2022, the PD's report on recommendation responses to the IPA's recommendation, and also our use of force biannual report will cover that, which will also cover our use of force from the second half of 2022. And again, we hope to have that out in the coming weeks, well before the IPA comes in front of the council on June 12th.
Great, thanks.
And I actually tried to, I'm sorry, Councilmember Vinker.
I just want to make sure I heard. So all three of those reports are expected before June 12th.
Yes, and it's our endeavor to get those out as soon as we can, so the public and the council have a chance to read them, consume them, and then if they have questions for the IPA when they come on the 12th, they're prepared for that.
Thank you.
Now breeze through the next ones kind of quickly. Item H was use of force reports, which the chief also just spoke about. Those are now included with the IPA updates. Item I, referring police reform legislative priority to our legislative guidelines. That was added, and the legislative guidelines that was adopted at the end of last year includes that. And our lobbyist with Townsend Public Affairs does keep that present of mind in watching bills that are happening in Sacramento. Item J, referring all of the race and equity work to your committee. Obviously, we are doing that. Item M, we held a community summit on gender equity in 2021. And then the last piece of that is working on a CDAW ordinance, which staff is continuing to draft. CDAW, which I never remember what the acronym stands for, the Convention on Equality.
Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women.
Thank you.
I believe the acronym is in French. Anyway, it's the UN Convention on Girls and Women.
Thank you.
And so the item there for item M was to hold the Gender Equity Summit, which we've done, but we still have as a to-do to work on that, a Palo Alto specific version of that ordinance.
And who is that, a staff project or who does that? And to whom is it given? Like, talk a little bit more about the goal of that, or what is the intended audience, the intended impact?
Yes. And I also have a staff person online. So I'm starting, and then I offer Ms. Vanderswag to jump in. So the staff is drafting it, and we would bring that draft to the council. So the city council would definitely have the action there. In terms of the intended audience for this, is the idea of CDAW is to provide additional, I'm trying to make sure I frame these words properly. Go ahead, Ms. Dunn.
Sure. There's been different ways that jurisdictions have signed on to amplified and promoted the UN Convention. And it is the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And it is actually English acronym, although not an intuitive one. So Palo Alto already has a first level of endorsement of the principles of CDOT, which was adopted by resolution a number of years ago, saying that we support and endorse these ideas and principles. There is some desire in the community amongst some to take an additional step to provide more structure and more focus around the CDOT efforts. And I'm not sure exactly where we're going with that. There's lots of different options, very, very large major metropolitan areas, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and a couple of counties do have somewhat structured programs and actually have staff and city departments, and that's not what's contemplated here.
So when you talk about the other cities or jurisdictions, are those typically like the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls? Okay. And Lori Nishiri McKenzie, was she here in her capacity as the head of the Stanford VMware lab?
She was representing Stanford when she was the keynote at our summit. Yes.
Okay. Because that innovation lab has to do with gender equity policy. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank
And
you.
she was really great. We're very,
Yeah.
very grateful and appreciative she made the time.
Yeah, she is great. Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so the next item N, relates to the Cahoots type program, which we already spoke about with all of the acronyms on the alternative response models. So we'll go to item O, which relates to amending the IPA contract to meet with the council in open session twice a year. So that we've spoken about as well. Item P, refer to Policy and Services Committee the consideration of the IPA oversight of internal complaints regarding misconduct related to harassment, discrimination, and retaliation resulting in city investigation of uniformed officers. That was also added to the contract for the IPA's work by the City Council. Item Q, let me know if you need me to stop. Of course.
Maybe because the public, well, are you ready?
Yeah. Actually, if I could just ask on that. So was that intended to be a one-time thing or I mean, this reference to PNS. So consideration of IPA oversight as a policy, like how they would do the oversight. Is that the idea?
So at the time of this recommendation and at the end of November 2020, the IPA did not at that time receive these type of cases. So the City Council was recommending that this committee evaluate whether to make that recommendation to the full council and also work with the IPA to see what was possible. And so with that time passing, when that discussion came to City Council, it was decided to include that in the contract scope as well.
I see. Thank you for explaining that to me.
No problem. And the last one here, then I will go to our two open items. Item Q is direct staff to work with IT to streamline publishing police policy updates to the city website on a quarterly basis. So that is happening now. As of the middle of 2021, those updates have been published regularly online. So with that, we're going to scroll all the way back up. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for helping me. This is on packet page 5. So the last 3 items that were in the list from City Council from 2020 were items C, K, and L. We just completed item K, so I'll start there. The item was to return in the fall of 2021 with parameters, proposals, and strategies prior to engaging with the Palo Alto Peace Officers Association negotiations. And the City Council has adopted the updated contract related to PAPOA. And so that item is now complete, that those discussions did occur. Go back up to item C, which is starting after the full implementation of the records management system and the first data collection period, direct staff to resume annual data collection and analysis of police contact data similar to the previous stop data reports. I'll give a brief overview of this one, and I definitely will defer to Chief Bender to provide the update. So this is listed as partially completed because we have completed our first data reporting period, which was the entire year of 2022. So our size jurisdiction was required to start collecting the 17 data points. I believe it's expanded a little beyond that 17 as of January 2022, and to continue to collect that data ongoing. So last year was our first year to have all of the data collected comprehensively according to the RIPA law. And this year, we are working on being able to share that data. So I'll look to Chief Bender to provide that update on the process and timing for that.
Thanks, Chantal. I think we're very close. I would say the packet says mid-March. I'm sorry, mid-May, apologize. We're going to make that, or maybe even a little bit before. That's the intended goal. It will be a dashboard detailing the data from 2022 that we've collected, and it will provide that for anyone who wants to log on and take a look at what our stats and the data shows.
And in addition to our dashboard, we're also looking for a research partner. We've made some good headway on that so that we can have a little bit of help in asking the questions of what does the data mean. And so we're making the data available as the chief discussed, but also making sure that we have a partner that can help us parse through it. The previous reports that were released starting, I believe, around 2007, either we ended in 07 or started in 07. I have to check my notes. It was just a report out of the data. So we want to make sure that if we're collecting this amount of data, which is newer, that more municipalities in California are collecting the data per the state law, that we're actually understanding it and getting something useful out of it. So that's our intention with the research partner. Awesome. So the last of the 17 assignments from the city council is actually item L, which is direct staff in coordination with the city's overall diversity and inclusion efforts to conduct a workforce demographic assessment as baseline information and to pursue an employee assessment to measure the city workforce culture. We have contracted with a organization called Ivy Planning Group to help us with the organization assessment. They actually probably have already contacted you all or will be soon asking for a time to interview with you. So it's not spam. Please do respond and set up a time.
Mine is next week.
Awesome. And they're very friendly, so you don't have to worry about that. So they will be doing interviews of some staff at the city, as well as the city council members. And we have them working on focus groups with our workforce. So a lot of the assignments that you've seen so far on this list are external facing with some internal influence, but this item L is really all of our workforce DEI efforts, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this item is really big, and it's really exciting that we have Ivy as a partner, and we've done an all hands meeting with staff at the end of last year, and these focus groups and interviews are our next step as part of the workforce assessment. In terms of the demographic analysis, we are getting really close to being able to have that information available. And that is really, we've done a demographic analysis of our board and commission members. It was offered as a voluntary survey in 2021. And our goal is to get on an annual cycle, especially related to when you are doing your recruitments of new board members. It's just good information to have. And then similarly, we're working on the demographic analysis information internally of our workforce. The idea is that we can't know how we've changed over the years if we're not actually intentionally collecting the data and making sure that we understand our demographic information. So that is also part of this item, and we're actively moving forward with that.
That is terrific, and that is big, both in terms of being momentous and in terms of being a large project.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about Ivy? Do they specialize in public entities, or just where are they located? Just a quick, like.
Yes, of course. They have worked with more private entities than public entities. Their approach is actually one that stands out a lot to me, though, in the question of really not approaching the DEI conversation of what to fix, but approaching it as we're all trying to progress forward and make more inclusive and understanding and working environments. And really thinking about how to infuse equity into the work that we do. So not just this thing that, oh yeah, by the way, let me think about doing something else, but really thinking about our work through an equity lens. And so they have done a lot of work. They've worked with really large corporate agencies, and they have worked with some state agencies in terms of government, not as many cities, but I've still been pretty comfortable with the work that they've done with us thus far.
So it sounds like they not only do the analysis and draw some conclusions with what they've seen, but they try to help us address. They help us plan to go forward and what to do and implement. Have suggestions for what we actually do. Is that right?
It is. Our contract with them takes us so far. And so I'm looking at ways to add a little bit more onto that. So you may see that at the city council.
But that's something they do. So
They
that's
have,
great.
yeah.
We wouldn't have to shift or be on our own. And do you have any sense of the timing of when the first step would be done?
So the focus groups, I think they're anticipating finishing those before the end of June. So before the council break, the interviews and focus groups. And then I think they'll spend some of the summer doing additional analytical work. They're also doing a document review. So we've shared with them some of our recruitment documents, some of our procurement documents. I think we still owe them a couple of documents that they've requested, but really trying to see from communication standpoint, what information that we have and applying that equity lens to it.
That's great. And I'm glad to hear, I believe you said it includes commissions as well.
The work that Ivy is doing does not include our commissions, but staff, by staff, it's mostly me. At this point, we do have a staff person, a senior management analyst that we're starting the recruitment for. It was approved in the budget this current year, but we are just getting that recruitment underway. So we'll have another staff person that is helping to carry things forward in between. But we're doing some of the work related to boards and commissions, and we've done a microaggression and implicit bias training at the end of last year. And we're expanding that contract with Circle Up Education to make that available for new commission members and anybody else on staff who really wants to participate in it. I've worked with that organization before as well, and they can train large groups of people, small groups of people, definitely also from a perspective of advancing everyone's ability to just learn, not from the perspective in which you approach these conversations really matter. And I've really made it a point to add some partners that understood that we're all at different walks in the journey.
That's outstanding. I really commend you for that. And part of the reason I asked about commissions is just even like, so we just went through a lot of commission interviews, and we had, very big pools, which was great. The talent in this town is phenomenal. But I happened to notice that in a couple of the larger tools, if you just even take gender, there was only one man in one of them and only one woman in another. So it's just, these are things that I do think we need to take note of and wonder why and be curious about and see what we might need to do to address some of those. So I really, I'm impressed by this, and thank you for your work on it.
Good. And absolutely your point of the noticing it anecdotally is one thing, but it's another if we actually have the data to help us see, oh, maybe next time we need to do some more targeted outreach in certain parts of the community because we noticed that we had less candidates available for this commission that had whatever the background may be it gender or anything else. So not saying that anybody is guaranteed any position, but people can't possibly get the positions if they don't get in the running for them. So part of that is the recruitment opportunities there.
Yes, well said. Thank you.
That's all Ivy, so I give them credit.
Okay, does the clerk know if there's any public comments? And can you give them 3 minutes? And if you can, enable their video so we can also see them.
Our first speaker is Winter Dellenbach.
Dellenbach. I'm really happy to be with you tonight. First, I want to say how hopeful I am of making progress. I keep my eyes on the Palo Alto Police Department, and I appreciate so much staff time, both city staff and Palo Alto Police Department staff, the chief's time in working on continuing issues that were first started in June of 2020 as a response to the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. And so I want to really state that I am very supportive of all of the efforts and everybody who's contributed to them to date. So if I come across as critical sometime, I mean it as positive and supportive. But I will continue to keep my eyes open and offer my suggestions. I sent a memo today. It was way late, and I so apologize for that. It was rude, but frankly, I couldn't find time to do it at any other time. And I hope if you didn't have a chance to read it, you will read it. And I just wanted to highlight just a few things about it. The RIPA data is, as Chief Bender, I'm always happy to see the chief. He's always value added in my book. He mentioned RIPA data will be hopefully available mid-May, if not before. And I urge everybody to take a look at that, even that it's going to be kind of in a raw form and not analyzed. I want to support very much getting a very good analyst in. I'm glad we're making maybe a little headway on that, because depending on how that data comes out, data is just data unless you do something with it. If we can make it work for us, if we can help it support improving toward what I think of as the ultimate goal is to, to have a police force that protects and serves all equitably, and have a police culture that completely supports that. We need to have be able to use the tools that we're being given to do that, and RIPA data is one of them. I also want to say that please, we need some way to advertise the trust program. People don't even know exists. I had a reason to call on it recently. I also want to say that, and I apologize, I have that the IPA wouldn't appear until August. I've been monitoring projected agendas, so I'm happy to know he'll be here meeting with the city council on the 12th. These meeting schedules are vital. They are a prime way that we can keep our tabs on if our reforms and accountability, all the things that we have put in place since November of 2020.
Winter, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being so attentive and listening to me.
Okay, I'd like to close public comment for this item. I know you guys already asked a lot of your questions and made the comments already, but are there any final general questions or comments that you guys have on this item?
Mr. Chair, I do have one other thing.
Oh, sure. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I also meant to reference the Human Relations Commission. They've had a pretty critical role in all of the city's work on the policy changes for the police department, as well as ongoing just history, et cetera. So right now for AANHPI month, they are doing, working on a referral that came from the council about gaining insight on the lived experience of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders in Palo Alto. So I do have a link in the staff report to that. If you have social media networks, please share it. The idea is similar to the work they did related to Black and Brown history in Palo Alto, is that we look at different reports and people's lived experience, present and past, and they will put it together as a report from the Human Relations Commission and present that to the City Council. So it's exciting to see them continue that work. And Ms. Vanderswag is online if you have any questions about the HRC.
Okay, any final? No? Okay. I have just a few quick things. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for all your work. It looks very comprehensive. Looks like you guys are kind of really finishing these items quickly. So that's great. Let's see. I was just wondering, is there kind of in all this work, was there anything, any kind of issues that kind of, that you found kind of through this work that maybe we should know about?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was a very, very broad question, so it's kind of tricky. I would say that there has been a lot of interest in this conversation, which I think is really encouraging. Even with our board and commission members, when we had the trainings available last year, there was a lot of excitement that came with that. Also available for the city council members, and I recall the same excitement for those that attended the sessions. So I think it's just continuing the awareness and knowing that this isn't work that one day will be air quotes done. Like we have to continue, the idea of making sure that everyone feels included and that our policies and our organization are moving in a direction to continue to advance that is just important. And so I think that there's been support for that. And sometimes it's realization that that's the case. And other times it's just excitement around it.
Okay, great. Maybe no news is good news. Do you guys track hate crimes? Because I think we do, but I was just wondering, where is that kept and where can someone find that kind of data?
I believe that's on our PD, Palo Alto PD page, and you should be able to find that there.
Okay, so it has kind of like hate crimes by ethnicity, like who the perpetrator was and victim.
Sorry, we've shared that previously with the committee as well. I'm sorry, Chief Bender, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'd have to look at it, Chair Tanaka. I haven't seen it in a while, but I know we have what we're allowed to publicly post, we have on there.
Okay, it's current and up to date.
We're probably doing it on a quarterly basis, so I'd have to check it, but we are managing it on a regular basis. I know that.
Is the clerk able to bring it up real quick, just for us to take a look to see how that looks like? Oh, okay. Okay. Looks like we can't do it tonight. Maybe you guys could send it to us afterwards. Is that okay? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so let's close this item and go on to item 2. Does the auditor have a presentation they'd like to review with us?
Yes, if the clerk can turn to your packet in page 16.
And if the clerk could also share the screen for this as well, that'd be awesome.
Okay, I have 3 task orders to present to you this evening. The first is entitled Procurement. The procurement task order that was presented to the P&S committee in February was approved in March by the full council. However, there was some discussion about expanding the scope of the procurement audit. And so we are presenting here some additional content that will be included in the objectives. So this overall task order is requesting a scope update based upon those requests, as well as a reassignment of budget to accommodate for the additional hours devoted to this audit, and also a timeline extension wherein the time frame for this audit would commence on June 1st and carry us through to the end of December this year. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have about the details.
Do either one of you guys have questions, comments?
Yeah, it looked like you were just reallocating originally budgeted items to cover these new items. Is that correct?
That is correct. There are no additional funds being requested. It is simply a reallocation to accommodate for these 3 task orders.
So my question is on the things that we're not going to do, that we've taken budget dollars away from.
That is,
did we decide that those are no longer necessary, or they were under budget, or what was the plan there?
there would be no time left within this fiscal year to accommodate for those 2 audits. And those 2 audits were long-range planning as well as ADA compliance. They
Right.
were the last 2 on the list for the annual plan. And so if we can reallocate the amounts that were designated for those to these 3 task orders, then there is no financial impact to the annual contract amount.
But you're going to propose to do them in the next fiscal year?
Yes, we can do that.
But
Well, they're doing the budget right now. So is that in process, that request?
No, the way that this would work is that after we complete the annual risk assessment and then compose an annual audit plan, these 2 audits can be incorporated into the FY24 annual audit plan. So
Okay.
it wouldn't be a matter of additional budget because the FY24 year will have its own full annual budget. And these 2 audits would simply be 2 of perhaps a dozen audits that could be completed within that time frame.
So just as of now, you're presuming these are going to be, that they are going to be done, or are you saying you don't know because council has to take new direction on that?
Council will approve the new audit plan, but these certainly can be included in that for the fiscal year 2024.
Okay. So,
And just to clarify, when you say they can be, I assume they should be if we thought they were important enough to have budgeted for 2023, that we would not want to wait after 2024. Is that right? Or, I mean, do you have a view on whether or not they are two of the ones that should be included for fiscal 24?
Yes, I would say both these topics are quite relevant. In particular, I know there have been a lot of recent conversations around planning and objectives. And so certainly the long range planning would be applicable, as well as ADA compliance. So when you are presented with the new annual audit plan, you would see a list of audits that can be accomplished over a 12-month period. And these two would be included in that list. And then the council would vote as to accept that presented plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see, well, actually, I have one other question on this. So, in terms of procurement, of course, we want to get a good price, but we also want to see at the end, did the vendor perform as expected? Is there anything in this audit around that as well? Like some sort of retrospective to see, okay, so we did the audit, this was the procurement process, and the procurement process led to this kind of outcome. Is that their full cycle type of look back as well?
Performance can be incorporated into the process itself of selecting the vendors. And that would take us all, that would be assuming that the sample of vendors we select, that they have had time to perform. And we would be able to evaluate that in accordance with the terms of the contracts to determine that their performance was acceptable.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, item number 2B is.
So do we have to, take an action on this? We have to approve it, right? Do we want to approve this one at a time? Would that be okay? Or do you guys want to? Okay, does anyone want to make a motion on this?
do you want to do them individually?
Well, it's up to you. I mean,
Why don't we go ahead in case we have an issue?
okay, so anyone want to make a motion on this?
So what am I doing? I'm moving sorry. I'm moving the approval of the task order change 4.20 relating to procurement. Is that?
Anyone want a second?
Second.
Okay, can the clerk take roll or the votes on this? Oh, actually, sorry, before we do that, does any members of the public? No? Okay, so we'll close the public hearing.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
Chair Tanaka, motion carries.
Okay, do you want to do the second item now?
Yes, the second item pertains to the public safety building construction audit, wherein we conduct a monthly sample of construction activities. And we have now learned that the construction project itself will extend beyond June 30th. It is anticipated to last until the end of December this year, thereby requiring the audit function to have a little bit of time post end of year to complete its audits. And so therefore, this is a request for a timeline extension through March of 2024 to continue conducting these monthly activities, as well as a reassignment of budget from the same two audits as previously described.
Question, comments? No?
No, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. I don't, so basically the entire construction process was not going to be done when anticipated. So thus to audit that whole process, it sort of necessarily needs to be extended. Is that the idea?
That's correct.
All right, no, I have no questions beyond that.
Okay, great. My question is, because I think at least from the consent items, it looks like we've had at least 2 delays on the public safety building construction. Do we know the nature of what's causing the continual delays of the construction?
So council member, this topic is not on your agenda and the staff is not present who can support that conversation. That's for Public Works.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's something that I'm interested in knowing, but I assume that you will cover this, but it looks like we have to do this because there's delays. But is the audit going to cover that topic of why there's delays, trying to root cause it?
We can certainly include that in our ending report. Yes.
Okay, great. I think that's important because of these delays, this of course cost you guys, or it costs us more because we have to pay you more for this, but all the other vendors also are getting extensions as well. So it would be good to understand what's causing this. Okay, great. Okay, shall we make a motion?
I'd move the adoption of 4.08 public safety building task order change.
Second.
Okay, can the clerk take the vote?
Chair Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, do you want to go over the last one?
Yes. Item 2C pertains to our project code entitled Various City Hotline and Ongoing Office Administrative Functions. This budget for this audit is in need of a reassignment of budget due to the time consumption in a variety of areas. And so with the idea of various reporting, the tasks that are included in this project code include project management, coordination of audit status meetings and reporting, billing, staffing being assigned to the various audits in the annual audit plan status reporting, hotline responses, and committee and council meetings, as well as presentations. And so we are in need of additional hours to be devoted to this collection of activity. And we would like to, again, reassign budget for that purpose for the remainder of fiscal year 23.
Okay, question, comments?
Yeah. I guess perhaps if you could expand on the reason that Baker Tilly needed to spend more time on the city hotline related activities.
Well, the activities that we needed to spend extra time on are not limited to the hotline. They're actually inclusive of all of these various activities. We've had a number of, we did have some restarts related to the transition that was made back in the end of the summer. We've had a number of audit reports that needed to be done and redone, number of task orders, project management related to billing activities as well. And so the budget for this project code was not sufficient. I don't have a history on how we arrived at this number, but that was not sufficient for us to complete all of these activities. When we charge hours to each individual audit, those hours are strictly devoted to the execution of the plan for the audit, as well as to report out on that audit and follow up, are not included in the individual audit budgets, but rather in the administrative category.
And can you ballpark, so roughly how far off were we? How much additional, what, like percentage?
We are proposing to increase the amount of time to 621 hours for the year. So this covers everything from July 1 through June 30th. So that increase would be actually 100%.
I see. So originally it was roughly 600 hours and we're looking at 600 more.
Correct. That's correct.
And I guess I'm just, maybe it's just that I don't know the history. I'm just not getting why we were off by that much. I understand there have been a variety of change orders, it sounds like, and other issues, but I'm trying to understand just a little bit of the backstory on why they weren't anticipated. If I'm understanding right what you're saying.
Right. Unfortunately, I was not here when these amounts were allocated for the annual year. However, in coming on and working with, I have another manager that is devoted to some of these activities. And between the two of us, making the presentations that need to be made, ensuring that all of the billing for the variety of topics are accurate and complete, as well as coordinating specialized staff as well. For example, in terms of the construction audit, we are actually seeking subject matter expertise in certain areas. And so we're coordinating those individuals throughout Baker Tilly to come and work on the reviews for Palo Alto. And the time that is spent on doing that and making sure that it is appropriate was definitely more than what was originally anticipated with the $60,000 budget.
Okay, I think I understand. I just don't understand why.
Why it was not estimated?
Yeah, why the estimate is so far off. That's all. I've just been held to a lot of estimates over the last 30 years. So I'm just wondering.
Well, I frankly had the same question myself. So
Okay.
I'm not certain as to what the rationale was at the time.
Do you have any understanding of whether or not it was because of a personnel change you're coming in midway, or was it just additional work that was unanticipated?
It's additional work that absolutely needed to happen. So I'm not certain if it was anticipated accurately prior to me coming on.
Okay.
But I have to tell you that we have these types of project management codes with a whole host of clients, every client that we have. And so it is an undertaking to, ensure that all of those things are coordinated.
Yeah, no, I am sure. And the type of task you described makes sense to me. I'm just trying to understand why the magnitude expectation was off. And I don't think without auditing our auditors, we can know, frankly. So, but thank you for sharing what you can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other question, comments? Okay, does anyone want to make a motion on this? Okay, I'll make a motion. Anyone want to make a motion for adopting?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, can the clerk take the vote?
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Chair Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Chair Tanaka, if I can offer something related to the public safety building, I know there was a question on where you will possibly know about the timeline of that.
Oh, no, it wasn't that. I know the timeline. I just know that it's been delayed a couple of times. So
I just wanted to provide, there's a semi-annual CIP update report, so that'll probably be the best place to have more of that information. So just wanted to share that with the committee. And I think there was just a misalignment of the project timeline versus the audit timeline. So just wanted to offer that to the committee as well.
Oh, thank you. But the thing I don't understand is because on the consent calendars, we've been getting extensions on the public safety bill, and we got 2 of them already. So if it may be a misalignment with the audit, but it's also misalignment with all the vendors as well then. So
Yeah,
that's
so
why it's a little bit puzzling.
Yeah, so the semi-annual CIP update report will have more on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, good. So let's close item 2 and let's go on item 3. Does staff have a presentation like to go over?
Not a formal presentation for this item, as we discussed at your last meeting, which was just 2 weeks ago, actually. So it feels very recent. We have the list of referrals from the city council, the full council on your procedures and protocols handbook. And so we just tried to put one on your agenda today. We provided some background information. Some of the other items on your list, we know that additional research is necessary or invitations needed, but we defer to the committee and how you would like to organize your discussion on these and when, the agenda you want to set with them. But we did include a basic report as well as a supplemental report with some additional information for the committee related to this particular topic of the annual organization of city council. And that's it.
Okay, great. For the clerk, are there any people who want to speak on this item?
No request to speak.
Okay, so we'll close public comment on this. And want to see if my colleagues have any question, comments, thoughts on this item.
And to clarify, when we're saying this item, do we mean PNP handbook overall, writ large as to?
Oh, no, sorry. So tonight we're focusing on basically the, oh, I just threw it away. Hold on.
It's number 1 on the list.
That's right, number 1, but I threw the wrong packet away.
And it's number 1 on the list, but we said also we've noticed it in a way where if you wanted to talk about any of the other items on the list, you could.
Yeah, and I just might suggest that, and maybe by some of the grouping conversation we had 2 weeks ago, maybe it's now covered all of these. I haven't checked comprehensively, but I'm wondering if we should give the staff any direction as to what order we want to go through all of these, because they're kind of choosing for us, which I appreciate in the absence of any direction, but perhaps.
I think we should talk about it, and we have time tonight.
Yes, I think it's incumbent
Yeah.
upon us to give that direction. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, of course.
So did you want to talk about 1 right now, or did you want
Yeah.
to talk about the whole list?
No, I think we should talk about 1 first, and then I think we can use as much time as we want, that you guys have for tonight, to talk about any others, and also
Okay.
to figure out kind of like a work plan for the rest. But I think staff has 1 queued up for us. So they have a little supplemental, which memo that you guys should have.
Yep.
And so maybe we could talk about procedure section 1.1 first. So do either of you guys have any thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the extra staff data here because we didn't have that before. And I think it definitely does arrive at the 1 or 2 at the bottom going forward. And I don't think we necessarily have to decide on this tonight because it could be in Q4, or we could, because these 2 options aren't going to change. That's my initial comment, but I'd like to hear from others.
Wait, so you're saying what again?
At the bottom of what they call packet 35.
Mhm.
Sorry, packet page 35. Staff recommends that the committee recommend to council either maintain the status quo of the policy that we have
Mhm.
or set this aside until early 24 and look at ballot measures where this might be considered. I agree with that. That seems like frankly the only 2 options.
Okay, you're thinking of actually maybe having this on the ballot?
That their recommendations are, leave it to city attorney.
As I understand it, because the code that we're considering amending is also in the charter, which we cannot change without a vote of the public. I think that we could, make a conclusion or we could, well, the attorney can tell us, but the city attorney, but I believe that all we could do is put it on the ballot to be changed. So we can't independently add anything to this without going to the voters. And so I think we would have to, part of what we should consider in considering a change is whether it's worth the time and expense and effort to do that.
Can the city attorney confirm that?
Yes, it's reflected in our memo and it is
Okay.
accurately described by your 2 colleagues.
Okay,
Yes.
okay,
It
great.
requires a vote of the people, which would have to occur in November of an even numbered year.
Okay. Since we're on this topic, what do you guys think about like a directly elected mayor? Like a lot of cities have been moving towards that. Any thoughts?
I do have some thoughts.
Sure.
And they're, preliminary, because I think it's something that would take I think there's pros and cons no matter what we do. And I would think I would like my ultimate opinion to be informed by my colleagues here and at the broader council. But I think what's interesting is what Sunnyvale has done. Because they had an interim period where they had a 2-year directly elected mayor. But it's still not it's still a city manager model. So I should back up. So in a lot of places, particularly in the eastern part of this country, there are directly elected 4-year mayors, or in larger cities. And we obviously don't have that. We have the city manager system. In those other ones, you'll have like for example, in our sibling city of Bloomington, Indiana, Mayor Hamilton is in year 8. Was elected directly to 2 4-year terms. And they talk about the Hamilton administration there. So all the city service and everything are part of the Hamilton administration. I don't think we're ready to go to that, and I'm not suggesting we should, but what's interesting in Sunnyvale, they've kept with the city manager system, but they do have a directly elected mayor. I believe that is moving or has moved to 4 years, but it used to be 2 years for a long time. I think what's interesting about the 2-year, so 2-year tenure is there could be some continuity for relationships with other cities, with regional bodies, with national organizations like National League of Cities, U.S. Conference of Mayors, et cetera. So for me, I'm more interested in the continuity of 2 years than a directly elected mayor. And I am not interested in exploring at this point changing from the city manager system. So that may go beyond what you were asking, but those are thoughts I've been thinking about.
Does my colleague have any thoughts?
I would like to get more research before I would, vote on this in the ballot box or the voting machine. But I think there's some appeal to having a directly elected mayor. I would stay with the model that we have, not change the city manager model. But we have to see how that sorts out and how many years you'd have to do to plan it, and then back up from there if we wanted to do it, which this committee could consider doing.
Yeah, I've had because I've been serving for, I've met a lot of other city council members, and I've talked to some city councils where they've actually gone to directly elected mayor, like Sunnyvale. That's a good example. And overall, it seems like it's positive. Of course, the sample size is not huge, right? It's kind of like, it's only a handful of people that have been doing this, but it's certainly interesting because it does provide that continuity. I think it's more importantly, I think it increases also the accountability as well. And so I am actually interested in exploring it. I think that's kind of an interesting idea. And it's something that because every year we have these kind of like new set of priorities, a new mayor, and it rotates so quickly. And, we know it's hard to get things done even in 1 year, right? But so I think having a longer term and having some continuity I'm not sure, whether 8 years is the right thing either, but it is an interesting idea. And the feedback I've gotten from people that have done it generally like it. So I think it's kind of interesting.
I would just note that we could go to a 2-year term for mayor without going to a directly elected mayor. So that's another interim step that we could try to see how we could do it. Now, the pushback I often hear against it is it's a lot of extra work to be mayor. And so when we are, severely part-time, not paid very much, to add all the duties of a mayor for 2 years is something that we may have less people interested in. But obviously, if it's 2 years, we only need half as many people interested too. So I think there's a lot of pros and cons we would have to weigh.
There's an extra $500 a year. That's in our manual.
Yeah. I have a feeling that the amount we get paid may not be quite legal, but I could be wrong about that. But anyways, I think that's a good point. But I think that having a directly elected mayor is actually a good thing because it gives authority to the mayor versus if we just kind of elect ourselves. So anyways, I think that's, I would certainly be interested in, and perhaps you have more. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just say, are there any, do we know sample sizes? Because I haven't looked at it at all. But Councilmember Vinger seems like she's up to speed on this. Are there more 4-year terms for a directly elected versus 2 years? And so is that aligned in any way with the council? No, but that's not the term size, is it? It doesn't talk about directly elected mayors in terms.
I don't know, but I believe that's the case. I just think that it might be interesting to ease into this with the 2-year for a while and see how it goes. But not if it were directly elected. I think directly elected would need to be 4-year to coincide.
It doesn't have to, but it could be. You could do the Sunnyvale model, but and I was I asked, like, why did they do that? Like, what was the motivation behind going to directly elected, and why what was the kind of motivation? And I think it's kind of things we talked about, which is it's really hard to get something done in 1 year, right? It's just extremely hard, and so you want it to be longer, right? And also people have to sign up for it. But it's also kind of, you need that kind of authority of the voters as well. So that was kind of the reason why they went to directly elected. And I think it's nice because it also provides more continuity from our priorities to kind of to kind of the other things, like the other longer term things that we're trying to get done as a city. So yeah, so I think that might be a good tool for the city council. I don't think it's going to affect me at all, but maybe for the rest of you guys, maybe it'll be something that would be beneficial. But so maybe as a follow-on, maybe we should do is, maybe ask for a little bit more data than we got here about who's directly elected. I mean, we could also talk to our colleagues. We see them all the time, probably from various committees that we're on or boards and stuff. So, but what do you guys think might be a good next step?
I was going to say, just with the task at hand, I still think we need to pick one or two, sometime this year and go back and make a recommendation on that. And my inclination is just to stay with the status quo, particularly if we're going to be evaluating something a bit more significant, like changing the length of the term or doing a direct mayor. So if we're in transition, we should do it with a status quo, not go to a transition of getting on the ballot and then changing it in a year or two after that. So to me, number one makes sense to do and recommend, now or in the context of these other 6 items.
Yeah, I would concur. I don't want to go through the time and expense of a ballot measure if we are seriously considering other mechanisms. So I guess my question would be maybe to staff as to how we might be able to go about exploring that. So in other words, if we wanted, I'm not sure if it's properly agendized tonight, but I would be interested in pursuing having more information and having a conversation about whether we wanted a longer term for mayor and or a directly elected mayor. And I assume that would also require changes in the city charter and thus ultimately go to voters. So what would be a path if we wanted to explore that?
Right. So yes, all of those changes would require a charter amendment, which does need to go on the ballot and be approved by voters. And that would need to be done in November of an even numbered year, at the same time that council members were standing for election. So in terms of developing the idea and having a discussion about what, if anything, you want to propose to the voters, I think it's really for council to have that discussion initially. This really is a core governance issue, and staff could certainly support with targeted research if you wanted to identify what that would be. We did do an initial, just to give you a baseline, to direct the committee members' attention. We did a survey of every city in San Mateo County and Santa Clara County and identified how the mayor was selected in our most immediate neighboring cities. So that's a little bit of initial baseline information about how our neighboring cities are doing this work. So beyond that, I think it would really be for this committee to make a recommendation to council, either to set the issue aside for now in light of many significant other priorities that you would like us to work on, and perhaps then revisit that issue in early 2024 is probably about the right time to ask yourselves whether this is something you want to work on for the fall of 2024. I wouldn't wait any longer than that because it does take a while to have policy conversations, identify research that's needed, consider the research, and then do some drafting. And then items need to be put on the ballot. The deadline is usually in early August. It usually hits at the very end of your break. So council would place an item on the ballot in June before you go on your summer break if you were going to do that. But there's no rush. So 2024, is an option, 2026, 2028, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you very much. And by the way, thank you for the chart. That's actually wonderful. All the hot links to all of them. It looks like if you exclude San Jose, which is so big, it's a somewhat different conversation. I think there's about 5 that have non-one-year terms. And so it'd be interesting to just zero in on the multi-year terms, 2 or 3, to see what the pros and cons were, what went into the decision, what their experience has been, whether they had to go to the voters to get it like we would. I suspect they probably did, but it would be interesting to know that kind of thing if we were to consider it as an agendized item. So I guess.
Yeah, and 25 of the 32 are similar to us.
Right.
So that's like 2/3 plus, something like that.
Right. So it'd be interesting to look at the subset that are different to see whether or not that's a direction we want to go. I would be interested in having that conversation. Like you say, there's no rush, but and we have a lot to do. But I was trying to narrow down the sort of the research piece to just the few that have trod this path to see how it worked out for them. So I don't know, maybe that's something we could consider, whether that should come in, the fall or spring agenda.
Do you want to make the motion to make the recommendation to council, and then council can decide whether they want to explore longer terms or directly elected and stuff like that? So we could actually talk more about that. Is that something that sounds like something you want to do?
Sure, if I can. I guess I would move that we recommend to council that it consider the selection of a mayor by direct election rather than council selection in accordance with our charter and code, and and how long that term should then be.
I'll second it.
In parallel, don't you want to reference the fact that during the transition, the default is the same as we do?
I think it necessarily is, right?
I know, but we have new information now that we didn't have when we actually did.
Oh, I see. You mean
which is that if we wanted to get off of what we're doing right now, that has to go on the ballot as well. And I don't think the council's informed about that because that just came to us in this packet. So I think that's important for them to know. We can reference it, but by default, we have to stay where we are unless we do something different on the ballot. Is the messaging? It doesn't have to be in the motion.
So I think what you're suggesting is that my motion should include, and in the interim, maintain the status quo.
Yeah, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But isn't that what happens by default though? No?
It is, but I'm saying council doesn't know that. So we want to call that out to them. It doesn't have to be with those words in the motion. We can just state it as part of the reporting out to them.
So council members, I think if you're considering launching a conversation about changing the fundamental governance of this body, that is an action item for council, not a consent item. And just to note, you should be serious about this. If you really want to have this conversation with yourselves, your community, and with staff support, it will require some effort. And if it's maybe something you're curious about, but don't think is a big priority now, it might make sense to set it to the side while your staff is deeply engaged in many high priority significant items that we've all been discussing. So that's one note. I don't think that we have space on your action agenda before the break. So I think this would come back to you, to council, this referral in the fall.
Yes, and that is perfectly fine. When I was speaking earlier and I was saying, in the fall or, even in the spring, I'm fine with that. This is actually something I had thought about before I got on council, just observing council, partly because I've been observing other cities behaving differently. And so I've had several conversations with officials and mayors in other cities under other systems because I'm very curious about it. And not just curious, I'm curious because I want us to have the best system possible for this city. And this city has evolved and matured and is sophisticated and a little larger. So I think it's worth examining whether or not this continues to be the best governance structure for us. That said, I agree with you. We don't have to rush it before our break. We don't even necessarily have to have it return, in the fall. I do think it would be nice to get it considered before the next election cycle, so that if there is an interest and a will as a result of the conversation, that we could do it in 2024. That's my thought.
So can the clerk, actually, I second it. Can the clerk put my name down on that too? The motion? You have Vinker, and then I said I would second it. Is there any more discussion before we?
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
so I think council's counsel is very good on this item, which is that we really don't have to do this until probably Q4. So I'm questioning whether we should do this at all tonight, as opposed to just bring it up in Q4, because that gives us plenty of time, and they don't have time to go work on this and do everything else that we have to do. So I think that's worth doing, but we don't have to do it now. So like the item originally, I don't think we should really be acting on this until the fourth quarter.
So if that's the committee's direction, you could go ahead and make this motion, maybe add to the motion, staff to bring this item to council in the fourth quarter. And then this will be off of your current list and it'll be in our holding pool. And then we'll watch for a spot for it to come to
I like that
council.
amendment.
I like that amendment.
I'm good too. Should the clerk take roll?
Well, I think
I had a quick note as well, if it's appropriate at this time. I'm also wondering about the specific recommendation to council. So you're asking council to consider if it wants to consider a ballot initiative, or I think I'm struggling with the middle part of this because it seems like you've jumped a little, like a step or two. So I'm trying to think of the words, but I think you went a little further than maybe you were intending.
No, I think it's just not fleshed out. So it does need to be a charter amendment that would go onto the ballot. So it's not really in accordance with our charter and code. It would be consider the selection of mayor by direct election by placing a charter amendment before the voters.
I'll let her get that. And then I have one more tweak. Sorry, Madam Clerk.
We can talk while she writes. So my thinking on this is that we want to get council's overall thoughts on whether to pursue this, and it might come right back to us. That's really what we're doing. We're not saying we recommend that we do it.
Yeah, I want to tweak the language a little. I
Okay,
think.
yeah, like
Now that I'm
evaluate
seeing
or
it.
something like that.
Yes, I agree. We want to have a conversation. We're not necessarily recommending they do it. We're recommending they consider it or evaluate it.
Was that?
Well, we're going to revise it a little anyway. So. Okay, to request staff to bring this to council. Something else to consider. Okay, so after the word consider, could we say, I want to say whether the mayoral term should be extended and whether the mayor should be selected by direct election through a ballot measure. And one last little thing. So back where it says city council should consider, I would say evaluate. Is that
So it's a little confusing because I think the mayor, if the mayor were directly elected, then the mayor would be elected through the ballot, but you have to make this procedural change through the ballot as well.
yes? And I was trying to talk about the procedural change.
I
So
see.
yeah,
Okay.
maybe be not written.
I think we
clearly.
know what you mean and we can,
Yeah, so maybe we should say,
whether the
after-
city should place a ballot measure before the voters to extend the mayoral term
well, okay.
and provide that the mayor be directly elected.
So I really like the evaluate whether because it doesn't predict an outcome.
Yes,
I mean,
that's important.
evaluate. So maybe we could just take the through a ballot measure and say, maybe direct elections and comma, such change to be made through a ballot measure. Would that do it? Oh, Madam Clerk, you're doing great. Just need to delete the earlier through a ballot measure. Yeah. Madam Attorney, are we close?
I think that's getting more clear, yes.
Okay.
Is the
We need
maker's
through a
intent?
deleted
Sorry.
also there, Madam Clerk. Right where your cursor, yeah, and through. And a comma after election. I think that's,
I'm fine with it as seconder. Do you have?
Is the maker's intent to be speaking about our current process also having the mayor's term extended? Or is this specifically about?
excellent question. Yes, I think we should talk about it all at once because perhaps that's a viable alternative to having the direct election.
If so, I think you should itemize it as 1 and 2 so that we know that we're sort of talking about two different things. The current process could have an extended mayoral term, or 2, the mayor would be selected by direct election through a ballot measure.
Yes.
Right. So it would take a ballot measure to do either of those
No,
things.
that's right. That's right.
Because our charter does refer to each
That's
year
right.
the mayor's elected.
So we
That's
could
right.
say such changes. to
But
be
the
made.
ballot measure that would be crafted could include one or both of those elements.
Either of which changes.
Okay, well, then maybe we don't need the 1 and 2 then.
And
No,
then
I think we still do, to your point.
I think it's clearer, but
So, Madam Clerk, I think so fourth quarter for city council. To request after bring this-
evaluate whether :1. Right? Colon there and then 1 mayoral term. Yeah, right. Yep, that's right. And 2, whether the mayor should be selected by direct. I'm just trying to help.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason I had paused is I think that we need a to as in TO up in the preamble after fourth quarter for city council to evaluate. City council to, yeah, there we go. All right, how does it read now?
So do such changes have to go to a third line to apply to 1 and 2 then? I think so.
And let's
It
get
would be
the,
cleaner.
Character
Yes,
turn
or
after
before the colon,
election.
to evaluate whether a ballot measure should be placed before the voters to.
That puts it right up front. It's not, that's good as well.
and then it would be extend the mayoral term.
Yes.
Our clerk is getting her workout.
2 nights in a row.
And now we have to change to directly elect the mayor. Item 2 as in number 2. So we delete whether and just say directly elect the mayor, I believe. And then delete everything after that, I think.
Not by direct election.
No, directly elect the mayor. It's already there now.
Okay, got it.
And
Go ahead.
just of note, I know earlier in the conversation, there's a question of the council manager form of government, et cetera. There are a lot of cities in the US that actually have a directly elected mayor and still maintain a council manager form of government. So I wanted to make sure it was clear that having a directly elected mayor does not equate to a strong mayor form of government. So that's a very different thing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
I
Thank
think
you.
that's what we were saying.
Pardon me?
That's what we were saying, right?
Well, no, I had only listed the 2 like as alternatives, and what the deputy city manager is saying is that there's a third. Is that right?
From my nerdy municipal government life, yes.
No, thank you.
Like if you think of a San Francisco type model, there's a directly elected mayor who also functions as a strong mayor and has more influence over administrative policies, and then it changes in other cities as well. But there are many cities in the US that have a directly elected mayor who could be part-time or full-time. It completely varies, but they still maintain a council manager form of government. So
And in fact, is that what Sunnyvale has?
I believe that is the
Right,
case.
so-
So that's an important difference because
ref-
they still maintain the council manager form of government.
Yes, I had referenced it, but then I spoke about the other 2 as alternatives. So thank you very much for clarifying that.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this? Otherwise, we'll like to call the vote.
Do we still have that item scroll down, the maintain the status quo for now, right? We still need that in here.
Did I get deleted somewhere?
I think,
I think with this motion, it's not necessary.
Yeah,
to
I agree.
do-
I think
to
it
do
becomes
Okay.
redundant then.
okay. So we'll just report back then to the council that we did consider it, and we will,
And we can't change it unless we go one of these 2 routes.
okay? Thank you.
Okay. Can the clerk call the vote?
Councilmember Finker,
Yes,
Chair Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, great. So I'd like to move on to, okay, so I don't know how much time you guys have tonight, but how much time do you guys have to, like another 30 minutes, you think? What do you guys think?
Hours.
Hours, okay.
It's, it's not anywhere close to midnight yet.
Okay, okay,
half an hour.
okay, well, okay.
I just want to thank the staff though for hanging in there with us through all of the twists and turns on that one. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we can do some things now. So we could either tackle another one of these. We could also talk about, which one do you want to tackle next? Or we could do both. So,
I think we should point to those that need more resources,
Mhm.
either appearances and testimony from commissioner chairs or work on central language from the city attorney or whatever to kind of bracket those. And then that's kind of up to you folks to, make sure we get our language or our commissioners and then see what's left.
Okay, I think the censure one, the city attorney already said that she was going to do it, but she has to spend some time on it. So I think that's going to come a little bit later. So I think we talked about that last time.
That's correct. So
The
I
censure
think we're
one.
targeting that for after your break.
Yeah, that's right. So
Thank
she
you. Okay.
talked about that last meeting, I think. And then the city, I thought the suggestion about having the chairs as part of this process is brilliant. I think that's a really important thing. I don't know where staff is in terms of organizing that, because I know that takes some coordination.
Yes, we were aiming probably for August on that
August,
one, just
okay.
because June is right around the corner. We didn't want to hasten that discussion with
Okay.
the board and commission chair people. But if there's a recommendation of otherwise, we can obviously go with the will of the committee.
Okay, so 3 and 5, it's kind of in progress. So we're left with 2, 4, 6, and 7.
We said we would talk about 4 with the commission chairs as well.
Oh, that's true. Sorry, you're right. Okay. Yeah, so that means we're just left with 2, 6, and 7 then.
And for if I may, sorry, for item 2, our intention was to just do the research and let you know what we found out. So if you want to have a dialogue on that, of course you can.
Well, I
but-
think it's better if you do your research. So
Yeah,
maybe do that first and then we could talk about it.
Yes.
So then we're left
and-
with this 6 and 7 then.
And for item 6, you all discussed that
that's true.
last time. So we
Actually,
have
yeah.
enough to work off
We should
of.
have a little checklist item.
I know, I could do out these as check marks next
Well,
time.
we talked about doing a quote second reading here
Exactly.
of number 6 to see it kind of in writing and give it some more thought. So I think that's still the agenda.
Yes,
Right.
so that one is one that's in our camp to draft some language based off of the decisions you made last,
Okay.
2 weeks ago.
So through process of elimination, the only one to really talk about is 7.
It's the only one I had checked coming in
Okay,
here.
okay, so do you guys feel like we should talk about 7 now? I don't think there's much staff work we have to do on this one. So we could probably have a discussion now. Are you guys good with that?
The one area I would just note is there, depending on what the committee's ideas are, there could be some legal bumpers, parameters, limitations. And I'm not prepared tonight to fully explain. I can identify that they might be there, but I can't tell you exactly what they are until I do some research.
So maybe, sorry.
I would also be interested in having just historically what we've done, if it's maybe not much, I don't know, what some other councils do. I think, because I actually found your chart very helpful
Oh, yeah.
on the elections, the mayoral question. And I don't know that you need to do as many cities there, but I am just curious what our peers do with respect to this issue. So that would be helpful to me before we had the conversation.
Okay, so maybe what we could do is create like a little to-do list for them. So maybe one of the to-dos on this one would be, what are the legal boundaries? Maybe a second one could be, what are the, like a little survey of what the other cities do. Is there any other kind of to-dos that might be
The other
good?
thing I was going to say is this hasn't been done before, but do we know what other kind of contingency money has been spent on?
Like the history of this, right?
The history.
Yeah, okay.
Why do we need this at all, so to speak? And then we can figure out, do we split it amongst council members or whatever?
Right. So I think that the city manager's office, possibly not deputy city manager Cotton Gaines, but yes. And the finance director would be able to give you history on what council contingency has been spent on.
And I would anticipate there's probably a time limitation in which that's useful. These last few years are probably a little bit different because of the pandemic. So there probably will be qualifiers. It may not be comparing apples to apples. But the funding typically, we would have the information of what it's been spent on for at least some number of years. I'll check with Director Noze on that.
Yeah, I mean, the other side, however, is that this is kind of a new proposal. As I understood it, when it came up on council, it was sort of like, just give an individual council member, I remember one thing, when there were fires outside the area, we spent some money, gave some time too. Some fire folks went up there, but we spent some money to help them recover from it. That is obviously more direct council kind of gift contingency expense. As I understood the request, this is if a council member wants to have a neighborhood picnic that's not going to be covered by the block party money.
Or like some cities, like Mountain View, right? So I know some of the Mountain View council members, they use it to handle phone calls with constituents. So stuff like that. So it's just because like, for instance, I think we, I forgot how much we get, but I know my paycheck at the end of the month is 0. So, but it's like covering just basic kind of expenses. So I think that's kind of the idea.
So this is one of the legal parameters. So there are very strict state rules on raising council compensation. And these were put in place in a series of laws that were adopted by the legislature after the City of Bell scandal. So
What scandal was that?
the City of Bell,
Oh.
which had raised compensation without public transparency to very high levels. And that it was a corruption situation. So we can describe those rules to you. I will confirm this, that I'm nearly certain that there is room to increase council's base compensation within those rules, but there are procedures by which that has to be done, and there's a limitation on the amount annually, et cetera. So we can bring all of that to you. Also, council support items may be taxable. So that's a really different kind of use of council contingency than the current historical use, which is really to fund essentially grants or in some cases charitable donations that are within the city's purview of, helping out another city or another local government that is experiencing a disaster, those kinds of things. Events that come up that are for a city purpose, but are not related to a council member's compensation or individual tools. Another area where there will be a parameter will be on campaigning, anything that could be related to council campaigns.
Sure. So the things I have listed or captioned, maybe, I don't know if the clerk could start capturing these as some notes for us. Now, what do the other cities do? The history, legal boundaries. Is there a fourth one? No? Okay. So maybe you could bring up and share the screen, and then we could try to craft this into a motion for 7.
Yeah, I don't think there's a fourth one because I kind of said, what's the history? And Ed said, what's the history? And we said it different ways. So I think it comes out the same. I think we should also sort of circumscribe what other cities do so that our staff doesn't have to go crazy with, a list of 25. So I also think that Ms. Cotton Gaines' comment about the timing is really smart in terms of the pandemic may have the apples and oranges situation. So I guess we would want somewhat comparably sized cities, and I would think we would want relatively, adjacent or nearby cities, and probably, a half dozen would be enough.
Yeah, thank you for that, Member Vinker. And the survey work that was done for the mayor was very straightforward. Essentially, we could do that with a computer terminal and occasionally a targeted phone call. But this information will require interviewing city staff. So that's not, it's not just our staff, but then we're asking our neighboring cities to also invest some time in explaining their system to us. So this will be a more difficult survey assignment.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we really need this, because this is $2,000 annually. If we made it more of, for example, we said it has to be this list, charitable organizations or stuff like that, and we're going to spend $2,000. Does it really matter what Mountain View does? Relative to the amount of work that they have to do.
Well, I think it'd be interesting to know, maybe they do $100, maybe they do $10,000. I doubt it, but that would be interesting to me. Maybe they circumscribe it to, certain, charitable work or mainly only communication with constituents, or I don't know. I think that if we were to do this, I agree. I don't want this to be, at least for me, I'm not interested in it being compensation type situation. But I think for our constituents, it's not a lot of money, but I do think our constituents want to know that we're being good stewards of it. And
Yeah.
so,
But that was my question. If we articulate, these are the only types of causes that you can use the money for, and that's published, then we're telling them exactly where it's going.
yeah, I mean, what I was hoping was that the amount of work would be somewhat intermediate to the go grab a web link and having to, call people. I was hoping they would just say, oh, here's section 2.3 of our handbook or something.
So just to note, our current program, which has been in place for many years, it's not available in any accessible form like that, even to ourselves. As the city manager scratching his head, what's the procedure? How do we do this? Right. So it's not available on the web.
And some other cities wouldn't actually call it contingency. In some of these cases, it could actually be designated funds in the budget. So it would require sort of a translation of some terms, just so that we know we're speaking about the same type of program.
I don't know. I would still be curious. I mean, if it were.
Okay, well, I'll find a place in the middle. Let's say that we don't want them to come back with it next week, right? We give them time to do it so that they
Lots
can
of
be
time.
leisurely, and come back with it. And, we could probably even call some council members if we wanted to, just to ask that. Yeah, right. But it doesn't seem to me like, because of those bullet points of things we need, I don't know what we would be making a motion on tonight.
Oh, no, I think just giving some directions so that when we come back on 7, we have this. So that
Yeah,
we have
well,
a
she
better-
set it up here that it's going to be a
Oh,
motion.
no, just for us to have some, so when we talk, so the reason why I asked the city clerk to help us on this, just so that we could be more efficient in our discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of keep track of stuff, but yeah, I don't know if staff needs a motion on this per se, or
No.
yeah, so it doesn't sound like it. So this is just so that to keep us
Yeah.
organized in our thoughts.
And again, maybe to streamline a little more. I mean, I would be happy if I knew what Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Menlo Park, and Los Altos did. Those 4
Yeah.
would just give us a benchmark.
Yeah.
So I don't know if those 4, and whenever, I'm not in a super rush on this either.
Right.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, so does staff feel like they have what they need to do so that we could be prepared for 7?
We do, and similar to other items, I'll work with the chairperson to sort of map out what we think is realistic for the timing on these, given the research we have to do, and see where we can go from there. I'm
Okay.
thinking for June, maybe we can do a Hail Mary and get your board and commission people here,
Yeah,
but
that's what I was thinking.
I'm thinking that with the extra work needed on these other ones, that might be a worthwhile thing to do.
Okay, are there any public, no one in public? Okay, so we'll close public comment as well. Do we have to take an action on this right now? We already did, so I think we're good, right? So I think we already talked about the order, so I think we're good on that. So maybe we should just close item 3, okay?
Yep.
Okay, we'll close item 3, and then we'll talk about future meetings and agenda now. So I don't know if, does staff have like the list of future agendas, just so that?
I mean, it just feels like we're a little bit backed up on stuff, but I don't know. I mean, leaf blowers and.
I do. I have to find it. I'm sorry. Usually I have that ready to go. My apologies. While I am pulling up my document, I will note that with the creation of your housing ad hoc committee, some of the items that were planned for policy and services that are housing related can go to that ad hoc committee. So we as staff are reconciling what those are. One of them was related to the rental registry, which was slated for June. So now that's why I'm also thinking it's worth trying to get the board and commission members here next month, because that's one larger item that probably won't come to this committee anymore. So as of my tentative list, knowing the rental registry,
Actually, can
maybe,
you share your screen just to make it easier for us?
oh, it's literally like, it's really sloppy. So it's a quarterly audit status report is our other item as of right now. So I need to check with the city auditor and see what her anticipated items are. And like I said, the rental registry was an item, but now that is going to the housing ad hoc. So I'll try for the board and commission item then.
Other garden equipment, they sent us that. The council sent us that.
Actually, I think the city clerk's, city auditor is still on. So I don't know if the city
Oh,
auditor
great.
wants to say anything on this about our future meetings or agenda. If so, say something.
And for the leaf blowers item, do you recall the amount of, is it in a place where there was additional staff work needed before Kim was to come to committee?
Yeah, I think so, because it was not just leaf blowers. It was going to be other
The
garden
small
equipment.
engines. I will follow up with staff to see the timing of what's realistic.
Okay, any other discussion? Staff, auditor, if you're still there. Okay, so yeah, so we have a little bit of time here. It wasn't a big agenda, so so it was easy. Any thoughts of how we can make the meetings more efficient, smoother? Any thoughts?
I just note that it's 8:49. Yeah, I was gonna say it's 8:49. That's pretty good by our standards.
Okay, good. Well, I think we just want to use everyone's time efficiently. So, okay, good. Any thoughts of how to, streamline things, make things more efficient? I'm all ears because I think time is very valuable and we don't want to waste it. So, okay, good. I think we are adjourned. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you.